At the center of the One Piece world sits a throne. The throne lies inside a room in MARJOIS, potentially in the Phantom Room discussed by MARJOIS guards. This is the throne of the King of the World. It is big enough to seat a large-sized person around 2 or 3 times the size of a normal human, as we saw in chapter 1084, which is similar to the straw hat in the MARJOIS cellar. The kingdoms under the world government pledge at the reverie to not take the throne for themselves. If someone were to sit in that seat, the person would become the king of the world. However, if the king chooses not to sit on that throne and be free instead, then it becomes a symbol of peace to all the kings of the world, without any one person in control, and they become equal. This means the king is the freest person in the world. As far as the public are concerned, no one sits on the throne, highlighted by its real name, the empty throne, as we saw in the scene with Stelly. That said, if someone was to sit on the throne, it appears it can't just be anybody. Doflamingo pretty much confirmed this in Dressrosa. The Don Quixote family parallels the story of Emu as we see depicted with these 2 panels. Doflamingo is a special character because of his background at MARJOIS as a celestial dragon. This seems to have given Dofi access to some secrets of the true history, indicated by his speech where he reveals he knows what the MARJOIS treasure is. He reveals that the national treasure of MARJOIS is in fact Emu's current body, and that someone was also once made immortal. When Dofi speaks to Law in chapter 761, Dofi says that if he had Law's devil fruit, he could have used the switching power to attain the national treasure of MARJOIS. Initially, Dofi only alludes to a power of the Opiopi, but his following quote confirms it to be the switching ability, when he moves on to talk about a different OP ability, which he states is the immortality surgery. So why would switching bodies mean Dofi could get the treasure? Well, firstly, it means that a certain body is needed, meaning Emu's current body is likely not his own. This just so happens to fit the fact that Emu has a weird voice, male pronouns and a feminine stature, which we saw in particularly when the hand crossed out Lelesia on the map. Considering all of Lili Nefertari's connections to Emu we've seen so far, we can assume that the body that Emu switched with was Lili's. Oda might embody all this quite neatly with the crown that Emu's wearing, because when we saw a panel of Lili hundreds of years ago, there was a speech bubble that covered the top of her head, which I believe intentionally was covering the crown. And now we've seen the Den Den Kushi, we know that, when it takes Emu's form, it takes that long crown form, so it's a part of her form. But anyway, the main driving force behind our protagonist, Luffy, is his dream, and dreams are one of the main themes of the story. This leads me to believe that, similar to Tower of God, the throne may have the ability to fulfill the sovereign's dreams, considering the importance dreams play in the overarching story. Luffy hinted this when the Straw Hats questioned his dream after Wano, and he replied, maybe it's possible for the Pirate King. Finally, in previous videos I've discussed Vivi's interesting relationship with ancient weapons, so perhaps the throne also gives Emu the ability to use the weapons we saw at Lelesia. Considering Lili's mysterious disappearance after visiting MARJOIS 800 years ago, we can assume that it's Lili's body that Emu was interested in, as I mentioned. So why can Lili's body sit on the throne? The most likely reason is that she is one of the 2 sovereigns. The name sovereign suggests royalty and an entitlement to a throne. As a descendant of Lili, we saw Vivi kidnapped by Cypherpole for some unknown reason, and soon after we saw a painting of Lili in MARJOIS. In chapter 907, Emu was holding the picture of Vivi, again highlighting Vivi's importance, all of which tells us that Vivi is the reincarnation of Lili's sovereignty. The 2 sovereigns were only explicitly mentioned once, which was in Fishman Island, where the 2 Sea Kings say the whales will be happy about the arrival of the new sovereign. Of course, Joy Boy connects to whales, for example in his debut panel, which then suggests to us that Joy Boy's incarnation is the other sovereign. But how does this tie back into the Void Century? Well, we learn in chapters 392 and 395 that MARJOIS was established at the end of the Void Century following a Great War, which is around the time Lili went missing. Vegapunk confirmed in Egghead that this is also when Joy Boy was around. Given what we know about the advanced technology of the Ancient Kingdom, how would Emu be able to win the Great War? How would her followers ever be able to beat the Ancient Kingdom? The 20 kingdoms under Emu certainly didn't possess any superior technology. We know this from the kingdoms that still participate in the reverie, none of whom even really have electricity. In chapter 147, we see Cobra's flashback of an older reverie and still basic technology, so nothing's changed. Also, we know that the people that do have the skills or knowledge to advance civilization and technology are pursued by the world government. For example, Clover, Tom, Vegapunk, all of whom are dead. So, how did Emu overwhelm such an advanced technology? During Marineford, Doflamingo questions, pirates are evil, marines are righteous. These terms have always changed throughout the course of history. So, Oda is showing us here that the faction in power has switched places many times throughout the true history, and that the people who are on the top are the ones who decide what the definition of justice is. This implies that during the Void Century, the definition of justice was shifted by Emu against the Ancient Kingdom. Dofi is the antagonist of the Dressrosa arc, where we discover a parallel implying during the Void Century, Emu and her followers manipulated the truth, which brought down Joy Boy and the Ancient Kingdom. The Don Quixote family tricked the population of Dressrosa into thinking that they were the heroes and that the Riku family were the villains, despite it being the other way around. The Riku family had been framed for a massacre actually committed by the Don Quixote family. The Don Quixote family pretended to be the saviors when they were in truth the oppressors of Dressrosa, which is the same story to what happened to the Ancient Kingdom. Emu made it appear that the Ancient Kingdom was a threat and the world government would be the cure. In the current timeline, Oda showed us how this went down through Lelesia. Emu was revealed to have a powerful weapon, which could be Uranus, or at least something similar, which he used to destroy an island and most of its inhabitants. Remember, flames were used to power it, and flames are connected to the sun, right? So it appears that 800 years ago, Emu used the same weapon on Enies Lobby and fueled it with something connected to the sun. By doing this, it frames the Ancient Kingdom, their ancient weapons, and the energy source that the Ancient Kingdom was using to power them. Interestingly, Moda and others escaping Lelesia just in time might hint that some survived Emu's initial attack on Enies Lobby, evoking ideas around the formation of the D-Clan potentially, or other rebellious parties. Now, there's more evidence for a huge disaster like this when we look at Whiskey Peak. I think Whiskey Peak has so many gravestones with the strange whale tail-like symbol associated with Joy Boy in some of my older videos because they were victims of a huge cataclysm, but Joy Boy discovered the truth and made graves for all of the people. So, if Emu did blast Enies Lobby, unaliving thousands while framing the Ancient Kingdom, even if the Ancient Kingdom attacked the world government, it would only solidify the prejudice against the Ancient Kingdom further, leading to even more war. Also, this would make a powerful guise for the 20 kings that still meet up at the Reverie to this day. The 20 kings to demonize the Ancient Kingdom, giving them justification to cut them out of history. The ironic twist here, of course, is that all along it's a trick by Emu who wants the power of the Ancient Kingdom for herself to take over the world. Anyway, this transition in how the Ancient Kingdom was perceived by the people of the world marked the shift in the era, from the era of the Sun, or the era of the Ancient Kingdom, to when Emu's time began, and the era of the world government, also known as the Moon era, which is the current timeline the readers are in. Oda has alluded to this multiple times in the past, from explicit to more subtle, with some of the deeper references, for example, coming from Giola, another Don Quixote crew member who used the immortal art and heavenly art, which symbolizes what happened during this period. So, in summary, Emu would not have been able to compete with the strength of the Ancient Kingdom and its technology, plus Joy Boy, plus Zunisha, plus the ancient weapons, and so cheated. And so instead cheated by shifting the status quo to facilitate the destruction of the Ancient Kingdom by the actual people of the world. Never fear though, for Joy Boy's here. Joy Boy left an apology to Poseidon and left something at Left Tail, confirming he expected his own demise. So in other words, Joy Boy came up with a plan. We know this from the Will of D, introduced by Kureha on Drum Island, as in the Drums of Liberation Island. Now, if Joy Boy is an avatar of the sun, then we already know that part of the plan is going to involve sacrifice, because that's how sun symbology works. Oda has shown this to us many times before as well. Roger was like Joy Boy and he sacrificed his head to spread the myth of the One Piece globally, and also by doing this his crew was not pursued in the same way that they would have been if Roger was still alive, which we can tell with Crocus and Rayleigh living in at least relative peace. Oden also paralleled Joy Boy, and again he sacrificed his life and kept his crew alive just for them to fulfill his will decades later. Shanks didn't sacrifice his life, well not yet, but he sacrificed his arm on a bet. This bet was a hope he'd placed on a future Joy Boy, symbolised by Shanks giving Luffy the straw hat. So, do we not think it's likely that Joy Boy made a similar sacrifice to place a bet on an 800-year plan? At the end of Egghead, we saw Joy Boy give his haki to Emeth in a flashback. This indicates that if Joy Boy knew he was going to sacrifice himself, then he might have given other parts of himself away as well. It makes sense Joy Boy took precautions to ensure his dream would be inherited, particularly considering it actually worked, and we literally see Luffy fulfilling Joy Boy's will over the course of the story. So what other examples can we see of Joy Boy's power being given away? Again, in Egghead, we saw Kuma receive the Hands of Liberation. Now, it might seem a little odd to give your hand away, but think about the classic pirate image. Hook-handed pirates specifically. We see a hook hand in Vivi's fight against Crocodile, and the hook is what colour, by the way? Gold. As in the City of Gold, Country of Gold, Gold D. Roger Gold. Continuing the pirate theme, perhaps Joy Boy gave a leg away, giving him the peg leg. This parallels Zeph and Sanji's flashback. It could also be that Joy Boy sacrificed his eye, giving him the pirate patch, which, believe it or not, might tie to Django because of the heart shape, which I'll touch on in a minute. Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi looks like a brain with a spine for a stem, tying to the pineal gland, and it grants the ability to realise your imagination. So the Gomu might be tied to Joy Boy's mind or consciousness. I'd personally wager Joy Boy split himself into 7 parts, which would be a hand, a leg, his mind, his heart, an eye, his haki, and even potentially his rhythm through music, etc. Something I've always found funny is the idea that Joy Boy had a southbird instead of a parrot on his shoulder, but anywho, let's get back to the spice. I think Joy Boy's last sacrifice was his heart. Law has the heart-shaped Opie no Mi, and he is in the Heart Pirates. He's also a surgeon, and another healer in the story is Hiruluk, whose backstory is also about a sickness of the heart. Corazon means heart in Spanish. Django can influence people with his heart-shaped eyes as well. The drums of liberation are the rhythm of Luffy's heartbeat in Gear 5. And there was this notable scene where Luffy's heart restarted with Gear 5, which we also saw paralleled with Enel's heart massage technique. But let's tie this back into the Opie no Mi. The Opie becomes even more relevant when we consider that Doflamingo parallels Emu. Dofi's plan was that his brother Corazon consumes the Opie no Mi and sacrifices himself for his sibling to make him immortal. The same is true for Emu, that his sibling probably sacrificed himself and granted Emu immortal life. However, remember, fruits can have wills of their own, so I doubt Oda will let it be the case that you can just force someone to perform the surgery, and even if they did, it's a surgery, meaning the patient's life would still be in the surgeon's hands. In other words, someone probably had to give their life willingly. So, who was this close to Emu? Well, one of the deepest running themes in the entire One Piece story is the bonds between Nakama, which is highlighted in Dofi, Corazon and Law. Roger had Sake brothers, and he's like Joy Boy as I mentioned. Odin hits some Sake with the boys too, and again, he's a parallel of Joy Boy. Luffy has Ace and Sabo as his Sake brothers, so there's another example. All of this makes it pretty clear that the Nakama and Sake Cup motif plays a pretty major role in Joy Boy's story. I think it's likely Joy Boy and Emu were Sake brothers, but I also think Lili could have been in that trio as well, as we see all the time in One Piece. Think like Obito, Kakashi, and Rin from Naruto, right? After all, Emu did have a painting of Lili and keeps Joy Boy's hat as a keepsake. Evidence also includes groups like the Monster Trio, Roger Garp and Sebek, and the idea that a captain has 2 wings. Now, Luffy's treasure is his straw hat. Luffy puts Nami in his straw hat by putting it on her head. This is because, although they're not blood related, Luffy considers Nami Nakama, telling us Luffy's Nakama is super important to him. This is further suggested in the panel where Joy Boy talks to Emeth, Zunisha's reaction to the drums of liberation, and Toki's adoration for Odin. I mentioned Joy Boy has a deep connection to whales. Whitebeard's ship is a whale, and what's most important to him is his family, even though they're not blood related. In other words, Nakama. Besides Nami, what was the only other thing Luffy thinks is important enough to go into his straw hat? It was Ace's Vivre card, which embodies the connection between Luffy and his sake brother Ace. Now, we know there's something physical at Laugh Tale, right? It's not just going to be a bond between brothers, for example, which Oda confirmed for us. It can't be Joy Boy's straw hat because assumably that's the one that's in MARJOIS. Well, what if, just like Luffy, Joy Boy carried a Vivre card of his brother in his straw hat? It could be that the treasure at Laugh Tale is actually Imu's Vivre card, which is why Roger and his crew left, because they didn't understand it necessarily. And I know this sounds a little wild, but there is some very interesting evidence that points in this direction. If it's true though, then why would a Vivre card directing us to Imu be important if Imu is always in MARJOIS anyway? Well, 2 reasons. Firstly, the Vivre card would be proof of Imu's continued existence, seeing as Vivre cards disappear when the connected person dies. Not only this, but what do we know about Imu's body? It's not your average male One Piece body, despite the male pronouns being used, suggesting there may be some body switching going on, as many people think. In other words, the Vivre card doesn't point to MARJOIS because that's Lili's body. Instead, it points to Imu Nerona's true body, wherever that may be hidden. A cover page featuring Robin as Sleeping Beauty evokes this image pretty directly. Now, an 800-year-old body is surely going to be completely decomposed, right? So why would the Vivre card still be intact? Well, Oda actually showed us exactly why. It's because of the hair. Just like Dax says with his afro piece, it all comes down to the hair. Brook has an afro despite being completely decomposed. Hair and nails are made from keratin and dead skin, and they still exist on Brook's body, suggesting if we wanted to, we could make a Vivre card for Brook, aka a person whose body is dead. This is because even though Brook's body is dead and decayed, his fruit allows his will to continue on. All this tells us that even if Imu's body was destroyed, decayed, or just aged, we could still make a Vivre card if Imu's will lives on. If Joy Boy was planning to use the immortal surgery on Imu, then it makes complete sense that Joy Boy knew he was going to die, but that there was a way to beat Imu. So, if Joy Boy made a Vivre card of his sake brother and left it at Laugh Tale, this gives our Straw Hats a way to find the real body and destroy it once and for all, perhaps putting an end to Imu's will. It doesn't end there though. What if Imu discovered Joy Boy's plan? This is exactly why I believe Imu erases history. Why does Imu want a big painting of Lili in her house? It's so Lili isn't forgotten, maintaining her will and not letting it disappear. Why does Imu try to make the world forget Joy Boy? Well, to erase his will from existence, which is a direct parallel to level 6 of Impel Down, and the same reason why Doflamingo is in there. Additionally, it's confirmed in Wano the Gorosei know about Nika, and that they haven't been able to find the fruit in 800 years, suggesting they've been looking for it. Again, we also see this with the Gomu's bounty being one of the highest in the world, all of which shows Imu wanted to suppress Joy Boy's return. Obviously, this bit's kind of a little bit strange because we did see that Cypherpole had managed to find the Gomu and get it. So I'm not sure if that's just a little oversight from Oda or if that comes into play later, but I guess we'll find out. Now, after Imu becomes immortal and Joy Boy is sacrificed, the Moon Era begins. The ones who are deemed undesirables as Dragon States are being thrown away like trash, and this is what is wrong in the One Piece world that Imu has created. I've covered this in great detail at this point, particularly surrounding orphans that have been shown to be displaced by war. This is the Moon Era. The sun, as in S-U-N or S-O-N, is lost, you could say. Oda demonstrated this through Lamb's House and exploitation of the orphans there. However, we also see children being turned into giants, children in slavery, and children sick from pollution. Lambs or sheep are a symbol that Oda uses quite often, for example in the Dressrosa arc with Law's little sister, Lamy. There are also some cool cover pages that touch on these themes very subtly and symbolically too. In contrast to these shitty childhoods, we see strong positive parental figures through surrogates such as Dadan, Rayleigh, and Garb. In the era of the Dawn, however, it might be that parents look after their own children, which could be echoed by Makino, who seems to have married Shanks off-panel and had a baby with him. Additionally though, this global dilemma is accompanied by another problem that plagues the world. The world has forgotten too much truth. Oda embodies this with Sugar's Devil Fruit, which in effect cuts people out of history so everyone forgets that person ever existed. This is the very same thing that has occurred during the Void Century and the modus operandi of the world government, which extinguishes any light when it flares up too bright. We saw this with Roger's name being changed, the deaths of people who researched the Void Century, and the biggest bounties being placed on the Gomu and the Opi. But in the words of one of Oda's favourite bands, here comes the sun, which in this case is Luffy. By combining Luffy's natural characteristics with the Nika fruit, Luffy possesses a notable ability to rally allies to his side everywhere he goes, which Dracula Mihawk describes as the most dangerous ability in the world. We see Oda represent this with geography as well, so as opposed to separating lands, Luffy will bring lands together by the end of the story. Luffy will expose the truth to the entire world, as Luffy did in Dressrosa with the Riku family. Dressrosa also had the birdcage among the big earthy rocks that form the border, tying nicely as a parallel to the controlled environment of MARJOIS that sits on the red line. Furthermore, we see a field of sunflowers, which shows us that the environment in Dressrosa is connected to the sun and is signifying its return. Luffy was born on Dawn Island, which of course references the dawn of the sun, and it goes without saying that he has the sun god fruit as well. Similar to Luffy's design, at times Nika bears a resemblance to a monkey. Sun Wukong, who is the main character of the Journey to the West, one of the most famous Chinese stories that inspired many series including One Piece, plays a big role here. You've no doubt encountered this character in many forms before. The most well-known example would be probably Dragon Ball Z with Goku, who is a monkey. Luffy's name is Monkey, and he starts his journey in the East Blue, travels to the west on a ship that is the Going Merry. A detail many people probably haven't picked up on is the fact that Sun Wukong has an extendable staff as his main weapon, and Oda, shows this with Luffy through his stretch abilities, through, for example, his punches, right? His extending arms. Now, the return of the sun is not something the world government wants, as it means they lose control. Who's Who is evidence of this, as he was made to disappear after failing his mission of escorting the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It's possible though that just from being around the Gomu, Who's Who got the conviction to free himself from Impel Down with a little encouragement from the yet unrevealed prison guard who told Who's Who the myth of Nika the Liberator. Now, what happens to Emu at the end of One Piece? If we stick to the Dofi parallel, it might be that Emu gets frozen by someone right before she puts an end to someone else. I'm referring specifically to the scene where Kuzan froze Dofi just before he finished off Smoker. After that, Kuzan says some ominous line to Smoker about how he's still the same person, implying Smoker knows the true Kuzan, which to me indicates they're Saki brothers. After Kuzan freezes Dofi, his first line is, "He is my friend," echoing the whole Saki brother thing. In other words, I'm saying that Emu might be frozen by the end of the story, which draws really interesting ideas around the idea of sleep and permanent sleep. Blackbeard, for example, never sleeps, so you probably can't dream when you're frozen, but you are preserved. It's an interesting idea. So if you've got any thoughts on that, drop them in the comments or jump in the Discord and let me know. And of course, it would also mirror the fact that Joy Boy Straw Hat is currently frozen in MARJOIS. Some things in the One Piece world cannot be stopped. So long as somebody pursues the inherited dreams and wills of the people, freedom will always be on the cards. Will Joy Boy's plan come to fruition? We assume so. In the meantime, subscribe, like the video. Hope you enjoyed all of this. I know it's quite an abrupt end, but this is just going to be a pure theory vid. I've been Den Den Kushi, you've been slapping that tushy. Take care, have a nice day, and peace.